Okay everybody, we're going to talk about understanding your targets, teaching yourself what it is that you can do to improve your accuracy by the way you hold the gun. So targets can be very distinctive. Enfield's a little more so than other rifles because of their two-stock setup. That means that if screws are undone, they will create particular shapes on the targets. So anyway, let's just dive in. Here's 7 targets that you will commonly see these patterns at the range. This one is for a loose forend. If the main screw is loose, you will create tall, narrow, loose groups. This is if almost invariably the main screw is loose. Now if the main screw is done up tight, either two things are happening. It's either bottoming in its hole before it's having the screw is bottoming in the hole before it's having a chance to bite on the wood of the forend, or the forend is shrunk through the oils drying out over time and it's recessed away from the trigger guard where the main screw would clamp it down. So there's the thing to look at. You can shim under that with cardboard even to restore that pressure. But those screws do vibrate loose over time and as you shoot and all that sort of stuff, and they should always be tight. Okay, this one here, this group here is commonly seen when you're holding the forend firmly with your leading hand and you're holding it tightly and you pull the trigger. What happens is at the moment of firing, that force, the excessive force that you're holding the forend with, will pull the front end down off the point of aim. So you'll end up with poor grooves, but they will invariably be below the point of aim. It's a complete giveaway. Your leading hand on the rifle, the forearm hand, is there to steady the forend, not to steer the rifle. The accuracy for your rifle is steered by your trigger hand. So remember that. Your leading hand is just to steady the forend. Your steering of the rifle to put it on target is done by your trigger hand. Here's a classic one that you'll commonly see with the number 4 rifles. This is what you get when the front top handguard has come loose and is shifted forward and is contacting the front sight, even quite a little bit. But this is what you get. You get wide, random, uneven groups. And they'll sort of be vaguely around the point of aim, but they'll be kind of wide and like, what the heck is going on? That's not where I aimed. Check your front handguard. This interesting little group is for not particularly anything. It will show up below your point of aim, like this, generally grouped below, and canted to one side like this. And what that is your trigger finger is not pulling the trigger straight back. You're sort of pushing it you're pushing the trigger sideways because your finger you're pushing on the trigger with the wrong part of your fingertip. Your fingertip should be somewhat through the trigger guard so that when you pull, it's a straight reverse pull. This tapered shooting, the tapered shot, is your finger rolling the rifle slightly to the left. So this little group here, which has come to the right, this comes when it says for pulling the butt. This is what happens when you're all lined up on the target and you're following the rules and you breathe out. You let your breath go and you're going to pull the trigger at that bottom of your breath because there's that still moment. So you breathe out. What you're ending up with these groups to the right hand side. What you're doing is you're holding the rifle too tightly as you breathe out. So your chest is decompressing, the diameter of your chest is reducing, but the tight grip that you have on the butt is pulling the butt towards you. Now that shifts the front of the gun the opposite direction and places your shots to the right. So this is holding your gun too tightly as you breathe out. Here's an interesting little group. I generated many of these before I figured out what was going on. And there's a couple of factors all going on at once. You get these nice tight little groups and they're separated by a couple of inches, and they're usually off for right-handed shooters, usually off to the right-hand side of the target. The distance between these two is how much your heartbeat is moving the rifle as you pull the trigger, and it's impossible to compensate. I've tried to pull the trigger when your heart's beating and when it's not beating to try and beat it, but you can't. What's happening is you're holding the gun tight too long, and the heartbeat is going dunk, 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 and the right displacement is from holding it too tight into your chest. So even if you're doing the whole thing of breathing out, that shifts the gun right because you're holding it too tight, but essentially you're holding it too long. You don't get this if you fire in the first 10 seconds. If you hold it for 30 or 40 seconds or a minute before you pull the trigger, this becomes increasingly likely to happen because your heartbeat is starting to really pound. And it really, your chest area and the distension of your muscle tissues travel all the way down your arm. It shifts everything. Here's a group that comes from pushing on the butt as you shoot, and this comes, it's two things. Again, you're holding the gun a bit too tightly, and instead of breathing out, this person is breathing in and expanding their chest. Now as the chest is expanding, it's pushing the butt away from you and the right hand shooter to the right, and the barrel is leaning left and putting the shots left. So two things, bit too tight and you're breathing in. And there's a classic one. It's a bit exaggerated. All of these targets I just generated with a hole punch just to prove a point. This is a bit more dramatic than it really shows up, but you get the idea. When the majority of your shots are in a horizontal plane and they're all spread out, invariably this is coming from a loose butt or a butt stock that's loose in that socket. Two things will do that. The wood can shrink over time and be a loose fit in the socket, and the answer to that is to pack it up with paper shims. Target shooters in the old days would varnish paper to the diameter of that wood at 4/1000ths of an inch per turn of paper. It builds up quite nicely and smoothly. And of course the other thing is that the long screw through the buttstock has worked its way loose a little bit. Now this will even happen when you can't detect that your butt is loose. It's the shock of firing which is herky-jerking the rifle enough to make this happen. So two things there you should check. Pull that screw up tight. Get a long handled screwdriver with if you've got a square shank one, so much the better. You can put a wrench on that square shank and put good pressure on that screw. Never put Loctite on this main screw because they don't tend to come undone when they're done up properly, and B, if you put Loctite on there, I can almost promise you will never get it undone without putting a blowtorch on your rifle to burn that out. And of course you've got wood on there, so a blowtorch is not an option. So never use Loctite. Don't grease the threads either. It should just be a relatively dry fit. But long handle screwdriver, something you can put either a vice grips onto or a wrench onto, and just do it up to a decent average pressure. Then if you're still getting the pattern, then you have to come back and look at whether your socket is a tight fit onto the wood, and if it isn't, put some paper shims in there and tighten it up. So there you go, that's it. This stuff would, every target shooter, whether handgun shooter or rifle shooter, trains themselves to read their targets. It's really good, fast information. You'll be surprised how useful it is. You can correct as your day goes. Shift your points of aim, shift the way you hold the gun, shift the way if you're standing, whether your weight is in the foreleg or back leg, all those things. Very satisfying and good to know. And again, it's all featured in my book, and done with these same targets. So it's all photographed up and written there for you. So that's it.